A big update on a story that broke last night while we were on the air. It broke while I was talking to Tim Walz on the air. We got a live reaction from him here on it during the show. This was the New York Times report, this insane story late last night, that the Trump administration was planning this morning, Friday morning, to give Trump's top campaign donor the U.S. military's detailed, highly classified operational plans that we as a country would follow if we ever went to war with China. Now, Elon Musk, the president's top campaign donor, is, of course, deeply involved with the Chinese government. He has multi-billion-dollar outstanding loans with China. He, not that long ago, wrote a pro-China essay for the Chinese government's censorship agency. The majority of Tesla cars now are manufactured in China. That is where he has his largest factory, and he built that factory with direct involvement from the Chinese government. So, yeah, I mean, in case it's not super obvious what the problem would be here in him getting our war plans for going to war with China, the New York Times last night, in this shocking report that they were going to read him in on those very highly classified plans, they kind of spelled it out in even more simple terms than you might expect from a regular newspaper on a regular story. They spelled it out basically in crayon. They made it so painfully simple what was wrong with this plan that maybe the White House even couldn't fail to understand it. This is what the Times said, quote, "It was unclear what the impetus was for providing Mr. Musk such a sensitive briefing. He is not in the military chain of command, nor is he an official advisor to Trump on military matters involving China. Pentagon war plans, known in military jargon as O plans or operational plans, are among the military's most closely guarded secrets." And here's where they switched to crayon. If a foreign country was to learn how the U.S. planned to fight a war against them, that country could reinforce its defenses and address its weaknesses, making U.S. war plans far less likely to succeed against that foreign adversary. If you have a war plan with a foreign country, don't show that plan to the foreign country just in case you ever have to go to war with them, because it'll mean your war plan won't work. Get it? Do you guys get it? You want me to say it more slowly? I mean, the Times might as well have put it in all caps on a single page with a picture menu, right? Elon Musk is arguably more thoroughly and uncritically in bed with the Chinese government than any other business person who calls him or herself an American. But as of last night, according to the New York Times, Donald Trump was planning on giving him America's most detailed military plans on how exactly we would wage war against China if we ever had to, despite his deep involvement with the Chinese government. Gah! That Times report came out last night while we were on the air. By this morning, nope. Wall Street Journal headline, Trump says Elon Musk won't get briefing on Pentagon's China war plans. Yeah, quick reversal on that. And I think there are two things to see in that reversal. Number one, hey, journalism, neat. When journalists find out something is happening in the government and that thing is plainly indefensible, sometimes that makes the government stop trying to do that thing. That's why it's a good thing to have journalism. So we, the people, can find out about bad things, and maybe that stops some of those bad things in their tracks. But secondly, given his track record, I don't tend to believe things the president says just because he says them. But in this case, I'm a little bit tempted to believe him, or at least to consider the possibility that he might have been telling the truth when he told reporters this morning, or today, that he didn't know this so-called briefing on the China war plans for Elon Musk was happening. He didn't know about it. He just heard about it in the New York Times. He told reporters today that once he heard about it because of the Times reporting, he, quote, contacted White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to ask. My whole adult life, we have thought of attacking Social Security as the third rail of American politics. You touch it, and it is a guaranteed political death. Well, we are now witnessing the strongest test we've ever had of that aphorism as Donald Trump grabs that third rail firmly and unmistakably. Trump has announced plans to fire thousands of people who work at the Social Security Administration, more than 12% of its staff. He has released plans to shut down dozens of local Social Security offices across the country. Simultaneously, Trump is also making changes that will force millions more people to have to go to Social Security offices in person rather than dealing with the agency over the phone as they can now. That means millions more elderly people and people with disabilities will be forced to somehow make their way physically to a Social Security office in person if they can find one, because they're closing lots of offices, because they will need to get help in person from a Social Security staffer, provided they can find one who hasn't been fired. The Trump administration also wants to give Elon Musk's group of Doge staffers access to Social Security's database of incredibly sensitive personal information. As we covered here on the show last night, for now, a judge has blocked Doge from getting that information. Today, Trump's acting director of Social Security responded to that ruling by throwing a tantrum and saying if that ruling stands, he will shut down the Social Security Administration altogether. And you don't have to be among the 70+ million Americans who currently receive Social Security to be mad about any of that, right? Making grandma wait in new lines is not nice, right? Making people check themselves out of the hospital or the nursing home to somehow make their way to a faraway office that hasn't been shut to wait for hours to do something they used to be able to do on the phone. It's not nice, right? Pitching a fit and saying you'll just shut down the whole administration is not nice. It ought to be obvious, right? Nobody needs to spell that out for you. Unless you're Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary. I don't know if you saw this today. I feel like in any other moment, this would have been wallpaper all over the American media. But this statement today from Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary about what Trump is doing to Social Security, this tape is such a political disaster. I feel like I almost have to close my eyes because I can't bear to watch it. Just, here you go. Check it out.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining.
Howard Lutnick, Wall Street titan, Trump cabinet member, saying that his mother-in-law wouldn't call and complain. She'd just wait until next month, see if her check came then. Anybody complaining about not getting a check is obviously a criminal. How does that comport with what you understand of the reality of getting a Social Security check? And who in your life you know gets a Social Security check? Mr. Lutnick went on to say that anybody like Elon Musk, who had been inside a payment system like PayPal, quote, knows the easiest way to find the fraudster is to stop payments and listen, because whoever screams is the one stealing. This is not like a random podcaster dude. This is cabinet official in the Trump administration while they are devastating Social Security. Yeah, maybe it gets easier if you hear it again. Here's one more time.
Let's say Social Security didn't send out their checks this month. My mother-in-law, who's 94, she wouldn't call and complain. She just wouldn't. She'd think something got messed up, and she'll get it next month.
Yeah.
A fraudster always makes the loudest noise, screaming, yelling, and complaining. And if all the guys who did PayPal, like Elon knows this by heart, right? Anybody who's been in the payment system and the process system knows the easiest way to find the fraudster is to stop payments and listen.
Yeah.
Because whoever screams is the one stealing.
He's talking about Social Security checks to elderly and disabled people. Stop the payments and listen. Whoever screams, that's the one stealing. Try seeing that through the eyes of people, even just people in the news. Maybe you can't imagine real human beings that you've met, right? But try seeing it through the eyes of people in the news whose Social Security checks have, for one reason or another, been cut off, and who are not the mother-in-law of the Commerce Secretary for Donald Trump. For instance, take Ned Johnson of Seattle. You might have seen his story going around this week after it was written up in the Seattle Times. Ned Johnson was very mistakenly declared deceased by the Social Security Administration. It was just a mistake. He is not dead. There's the headline in the Seattle Times. Here's a, quote, dead person on Social Security in Seattle with plenty to say. After this mistaken classification, the bank then deducted $5,201 in Social Security deposits from his family bank account. Mr. Johnson is 82 years old. He spent nearly 3 weeks on the phone, followed by 4 hours in person before he could straighten it out. And even though he himself could handle the interruption in his Social Security check, Mr. Johnson said he understood what could be at stake for other people. He said, quote, when I was in that line, I was thinking that if I was living solely off Social Security, I could be close to dumpster diving about now. Or consider James McCaffrey of Oklahoma City. His benefits were also cut off by mistake. And even though he, too, financially could handle the interruption, he says he understood that for other people, this would be a severe crisis.
You interrupt that for 7 days, 2 weeks, or even longer, and they're in bad trouble.
Guys, what you're seeing, and again, I think in our bubble of progressive people, anti-Trump people, anti-MAGA, we often take for granted what people realize. And we need to realize that Trump's betrayal of his own voters is viscerally felt, and that's why people are pissed. Because Donald did not run as a traditional economic right-wing Republican. Now, I'm not saying he ran as a progressive or even a moderate, but remember how Trump sounded on economics and compare him to Haley and to Pence. Because remember, you might forget, Haley and Pence both ran for president. They got like no support, not very much, but they did run for president. And both of them openly said, I want to gut Social Security. It's for the younger people. I'll protect it for older people, but for anyone young, for your children and grandchildren, I want to screw them. I want to make it so they don't have Social Security, at least as we understand it. And a lot of them said the same things. A lot of Trump allies, like Matt Gaetz, said we have to go after Medicaid and Medicare. But Trump understood, because here's the thing. Trump isn't a genius, but he has a better understanding of politics in some ways than Pence and Haley and Gaetz and all of those people. Because he understands that you can't go after a popular program like that before the election, because then people won't vote for you. If Trump came out and endorsed Project 2025, remember, we didn't buy it, but voters did, unfortunately. He said, I'm against Project 2025. I'm going to leave your health care alone. I'm going to leave your Social Security alone. I'm going to leave these generations old, very popular universal programs alone. He gets elected and then starts attacking them. Because he's less dumb than Pence and Haley, who would have lost to Harris if they ran on a cut Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security platform. And so what you're seeing now is important journalism from Maddow, because people don't realize Trump is doing this. He didn't run on Medicare cuts. Pence did. Haley did. Vivek did. Trump didn't, and yet did it anyway. And that's why people are furious, because he has no mandate for what he's doing.